You have a dumb cold open?
Yeah. It's very fitting or funny that, Ciarán, we've been taken to calling this recording configuration the Polish coalition. And our recently departed friend Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, famously would ask people if they're Polish or not, and tell them they're acting Polish. one of his many humorous gaffes, and like, oh, there's old Prince Philip again.
Down at the shop, down at the local.
I wonder what racist things he would say to Irish people. I don't know if you have any in mind. Maybe topical for today. Like, are you one of ours then? Just going up to asking people that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I struggle because he's a very strange one, I guess. Because I guess he lived through the Troubles, but at that point, like, by the time the Troubles rolled around, we were dealing with punished Philip. Hey, this is your weekly corner, Späti. It is the, as alluded to in the cold open, the Polish coalition.
The punished coalition.
The punished coalition. Punished coalition is the Polish coalition just after they've finished eating a whole raw onion.
I thought you were going to say in 1990, but that works too.
Oh, right, yeah. Solidarność coalition, whatever. Punished Solidarność. Yeah. It's me and Rob. We're going to talk about Northern Ireland.
Yeah, we got a pretty news-heavy episode. There's some stuff going on in Northern Ireland, a week plus of riots and street, I don't know which would want to call them, protest, actions, activity that is connected to the larger politics of Brexit, Irish history, the downfall of British capitalism, and much more.
Woo! So we gotta. It's like I'm gonna react to the downfall of British capitalism the same way, like any musician when they say your hometown, like when they're on stage.
Yeah.
Just like, woo, yeah.
In the stadium, when they want the crowd to cheer, they just put that on the Megatron.
Yeah, I always love being here in Munster. Oh yeah. But, oh god, where to start with this? I mean, the fun thing that I've been having on Twitter is suddenly, like, a lot of people having to come to terms with just what loyalists are. Like, a lot of, like, people probably saw it on my Twitter of just, like, Andy No was having, like, tried to talk about these riots, and a lot of comments of people being like, how can the IRA be Catholic and socialist? I don't understand. Or other people being like, those Antifa thugs won't stand a chance once the IRA roll around. Is like, you do not know what's happening here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great fun. I love these hot takes. It was a brief silver lining in what was a very troubling period for most of Irish Twitter. Solidarity with anyone who's on the subsection of Northern Irish Twitter and has to see the like hot takes from Yanks, mainland Brits, and or just like free staters. It's not a good time. I just saw a lot of people getting really pissed. Anyway,
yeah. If this applies to you, you should like strategically deploy maybe monkey videos. Something to distract people. To get them off your block, get some breathing room.
I did retweet a monkey tweet that's just like, that monkey's a person. The monkey's a whole person, just eating nuts. I love him. Yeah, so to go into the context of what's actually happening over there, over the past week, as Rob said, Northern Ireland has seen the worst rioting in years, ostensibly over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Northern Ireland Protocol is a part of the overall Brexit agreement that stated that there was going to be a customs border largely, between Northern Ireland and the island of Britain in the Irish Sea, usually referred to as the border in the Irish Sea. The only other option is to have a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which that was a little too retro for some people, to put it lightly, and what caused the problems before. So that option wasn't really tenable.
Well, it means something. I'm going to try to ventriloquize the dumb questions throughout the episode, but like, I mean, it does show that like, yeah, we're this, or like the people making the decisions. So, you know, the Tory government, you know, the Brits, they're like, well, we'd rather have you got to put the border somewhere, right? To make this agreement work with the EU. And does it say that they're, I don't know if more scared is the right word, but like they'd rather, piss off Northern Ireland than, I don't know, or piss off the Unionists versus piss off the Irish, I forget the other one. The Republicans, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you gotta pick your fire, right?
Yeah, you gotta pick your poison. I guess pick your fire. Yeah, the different types of fires that we have. But like, yeah, my suspicion, and all right, so this is not. Ciarán is going to say a bunch of stuff now that is not verifiable, but very likely. Northern Ireland historically has been crawling with MI5 due to historical reasons.
Let's go.
What MI5 is wanted to do. And my guess is that the Tories, possibly foolishly, or possibly on the assurances of the DUP, who were saying this foolishly, thought they could keep the loyalist paramilitaries in check. That would be my guess. And both of those people, as we'll get into later, were probably were attempting to use the loyalist paramilitaries in a bargaining position. First, the DUP would use it to get what they want out of the Westminster government, and then the Westminster government of Boris Johnson would use it to get what they want from Brussels. And we might still see more of that now that the tensions have flared up. But the other thing is, like, the opinion in the Republic of Ireland, I know a lot of people who do think this. I don't know how true it is. But the structures of loyalist paramilitaries are also less organized and a good bit older than Republicans.
Okay.
That would be the other take as well. The Republicans could mount a more threatening front if pissed off, basically.
Gotcha. Wait, if I can follow up on this for a second. So it seems like the implication, because the articles you sent kind of imply that the violence is kind of out of the hands of the political unionists. Like, you know, they've always, you know, used this as like a what's the analogy? Like a dog on a leash, and now it's, you know, they have the leash but the dog's off running around.
Yeah.
And that kind of implies a bit of, I mean, it assigns culpability in the sense that, yeah, this is how politics can work between like the electoral party and like the paramilitary groups on the ground, or even paramilitary is maybe too a word that implies like a more coherent organization than maybe it is. But like what you're saying, or maybe what it sounds like, is that groups in Northern Ireland, or loyalist groups, can then say, I mean, 3 paramilitary groups kind of announced in explicit protest of the Northern Ireland Protocol that, okay, we're, what's the right word, like withdrawing from the Good Friday Agreement, no longer acknowledging it, and now this, like less than a month later, is what's kicked off. So do you agree that is like basically what happened, like that they are, because most of the rioters are between 12 and 18, right? Like they're kids, they're teenagers. Would you agree with that?
Sorry, agree to what?
Like it's like teenagers, like, Like it says here in one of the articles that the predominantly working class Protestant youths 12 to 18. And so would you say it's accurate that they are kind of being deployed to the to an end by loyalist Northern Irish parties, or is it more independent, or what?
It is definitely now independent. So, like, it depends what you mean by independent. A thing that I probably have to bring up now is a thing called the LCC, the Loyalist Communities Council. They are a it's a group basically. Founded in 2015, it includes representatives from the UVF, that's the Ulster Volunteer Force, the UDA, or the Ulster Defence Association, and the Red Hand Commando. Those are like the three groups that pulled out of the what they would call the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, because Good Friday is too Catholic. I kid you.
I never realized. Yeah, I mean now I see it, but that's funny.
Yeah, so they do seem to be showing some sort of coordination in this, and I think they're calling the shots. Like there was skipping ahead a little bit in the notes, but like they sent out texts and stuff to businesses to like shut up shop and like board their their establishments and protect against these riots that are going to go on, because businesses are not largely the targets of these kind of riots. It's usually just Catholic communities and homes, maybe some Catholic-owned businesses. So, yeah, they are being deployed, but independently. Like they have their own organization that's not political, but extra parliamentary. Like it's independent from any kind of like parliament politics.
Okay. Before I want to get back to the narrative, because I'm worried I'm bogging it down with my dumb questions. But I guess what I wanted to ask is, how would this look different if they were being instrumentalized by Boris or the Tories? Because you said that that's also like a theoretical possibility. Like if things were in a different situation, can you elaborate on that?
They were kind of being instrumentalized before, basically. What it looked like before was basically a boogeyman. I mean, it was a boogeyman as far as London was concerned, as far as Westminster was concerned. They're so far removed from this. But basically, it's the kind of resistance to some sort of agreement that didn't involve a border in the Irish Sea was like, oh, this will piss off a very loud, echoey loyalist paramilitaries, like underlined, boldened, italicized. Like that was the extent they were being like utilized before. Mm-hmm. Historically as well, and I don't know the stories of this too much, so don't necessarily quote me on this, but like they have been used into intimidating like nationalist candidates from not running in certain parts of Belfast and other parts of Northern Ireland, much to like the DUP's benefit.
Okay.
So that's how they've been utilized in the past. This kind of largely looks like they're out of control, like what's happening now, because the border and the Irish Sea thing is Boris's agreement.
Yeah, he has shown no like I mean his whole thing was get Brexit done, and now it's done. Yeah. Right. So
yeah, exactly. What I'm talking about, what I alluded to earlier, is that the DUP and Boris Johnson will use this, the crisis tunity or whatever, the never waste a good crisis kind of thing. They will kind of like utilize that to some extent now that it's happened, but I don't think it was orchestrated, is basically my point.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's get into some of the details here. Because you mentioned that typically what happens is to attack Catholic neighborhoods. It sounds like for the past week or so, it's been mostly like fighting with the police. You have here that a car was rammed into the Peace Wall, so that's on the Shankill Road, right? And there have been some attacks like this bus being petrol bombed, but it sounds like there haven't been that many attacks on Catholic areas yet. Am I wrong about that?
Well, no, because an attack on the peace wall would be an attack on the Catholic community. Peace wall is erected between a loyalist community and a nationalist one. So attacking the peace wall is attacking the community. There has been, largely because it will, not that it would go unreported, but it's like maybe so frequent, but there has been like the lobbing of stones and glass bottles over walls and stuff like that into Catholic communities from certain positions. Another term that we might have to become familiar with to understand Northern Ireland is an interface area, which is a part of the city where a Catholic community and a Protestant community, a loyalist community meet. And there has been a lot of tensions in those in the last week due to like the petrol bomb situation of the bus, resulting in like Catholic youths coming out to the interface areas as a kind of form of self-defense, being like, look, we're not going to take this lying down, blah, blah, blah. In terms of like police, I've only seen small confrontations between loyalist communities and the police. They believe that the police are their enemy, the PSNI. But God. So jumping ahead a bit of the timeline again is that when the PSNI kind of responded to this stuff, leaders within the police kind of met with members of the LCC to kind of calm tensions, like, hey, is there some sort of agreement we can reach? While that was happening, water cannons were being deployed on like nationalist Catholic youths. So it's like, yeah, we're willing to come to the table and break bread with the loyalist paramilitaries, but these 18-year-old Catholics were going to like use a form of riot dispersal that is like deemed illegal in the rest of the UK.
There's a lot of back and forth with the like accusations. As I understand it, one of the like claims of why the riots are starting is because of a funeral for this veteran Republican Bobby Story last year, and like they were violating COVID restrictions and the police didn't do anything. And so then they're like, oh, but you did to us, but then that's actually not true. Is there like, is it just something that both sides claim to each other, or is there more of like a bias, or like the police use more force with Catholic nationalist youth?
Yeah, I guess to frame it in a way that I think most American leftists would understand is, did the end of the Civil War end racism in the United States? It's basically kind of the thing. That's kind of the role of what like a post Good Friday Agreement Northern Ireland kind of looks like. Is like, yeah, you did some stuff that were big stuff and we really appreciate it, but it doesn't remove a lot of the structural problems. So like, yeah, I think it's been pretty well documented, especially since 2016, but there's probably a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories of this occurring beforehand, that like the PSNI still treats the loyalist unionist community better than it does to the nationalist community. In particular with the COVID stuff, I've heard a lot of stories of just like the police in Northern Ireland cracking down on like violations of COVID stuff in Catholic communities that were happening much faster and more brutally than violations of COVID restrictions in Protestant loyalist communities.
What about the organization of the? You mentioned before that like the leaders of these paramilitary groups can like break bread with the police. What level of organization are they showing, or can we? So like the rioters are independent of like any, let's say, political parties. It seems like, but like insofar as the like people have issued death threats against port workers, and you already alluded to like coordination, like and warnings to businesses. Like what's the the network here, and like who has what level of power?
So The loyalist paramilitaries are very interesting because like they've just kind of split into like a whole bunch of different things. I guess we can talk about that a little bit later. In terms of control, there was something that happened today that I think the article that we were reading kind of the article we were reading posited that these kind of like loyalist paramilitaries actually don't have a lot of control over the rioters, basically. And I think that's now kind of been disproven. There was something that happened earlier today. Because there was a whole bunch of planned protests that were going to happen in loyalist communities planned for yesterday, so Thursday the 9th as of recording, that were basically all cancelled last minute. Which most people on the ground are like, yeah, the LCC is kind of calling the shots. To have like a coordinated cancelling of all these kind of protests kind of shows that the LCC is still in control of these areas. I think it was because there was some rhetoric about pumping money into the communities, these left behind communities, but the problem with pumping the money into the communities is the paramilitaries are still kind of in control, and it's basically just giving money to the paramilitaries. You have to kind of like, not to be against redistribution, but like you have to come up with a way that does like blanket redistribution, or a way that doesn't like target communities even favorably, because that is going to a bunch of former paramilitaries who are now like mostly drug dealers.
Yeah, so I mean that's a question I want to, like, you have a whole section here on like the possibly dying unionism, like from like a maybe ideological theoretical point of view, but just the like makeup of the groups and the youth gangs, if that's the right word, like what is their role like nowadays in Northern Ireland?
So I guess, Jesus, it's largely in their role. That is a good question. So I would say most loyalist paramilitaries in particular have capitalized on giving a voice to the poor working class Protestants, which left behind is kind of like a wrong term, but no, maybe it's not. They're kind of like a group of people who are kind of left out of the narrative, much in the same way that you could, again, in the United States, make a comparison to white working class. They feel incredibly aggrieved, and there's definitely a huge problem with them not understanding that, like, yeah, your situation is shit, but it would be much shitter if you were black working class. These people feel like they're left behind because the understanding of unionists and Protestants in Northern Ireland is that they are like middle to upper class, which is true for the majority of them, and like the Catholic population in Northern Ireland does skew more working class, but then they just feel like they've been kind of like left behind in the like framework of Northern Ireland. So like they kind of think when working class in Northern Ireland is mentioned, oh, you must mean Catholics and not us.
I see.
Yeah.
There's also, not to interrupt, but maybe it adds it, like when I read about it, there's often like a demographic angle mentioned, and when I looked it up, it didn't seem that dramatic to me. Maybe it's like a small population in total, like what, 1.5 million people, right? Or
yeah, 1.5 million.
And so like I think like the like it's like 10% or like 8% more Catholic, maybe 5% less Protestant, or something like that, which doesn't seem like a dramatic shift to me, but like I guess that plays into part of this feeling left behind and feeling yeah, I mean that certainly often, as we see, lends itself to like reactionary ideologies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's worth pointing out that the LCC that I alluded to specifically formed as the council in 2015. The paramilitaries are older, but they formed in 2015 supposedly to represent the Protestant working class, mainly of neighborhoods like Shankill in Belfast and stuff like that, which is featured quite a bit in the rundown of like what's happening up in Northern Ireland. But then, and I don't think this is kind of like historically true as well for the history of Northern Ireland, including the Troubles. These people become the foot soldiers of loyalism, basically. They're the like the bougie people who are willing to take up arms get like hired by MI5, basically. Like these are the ones out in the streets.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of the role, and in an extent, there's a little bit of truth to it as well. Like there are people who are kind of left behind in the sense of like Northern Ireland is a victim of Thatcherism as much as like Northern England, Scotland, and Wales. But then these people then kind of like take on these roles of community leaders, but then just solidify their power within that position by appealing to sectarianism again.
It seems like, if I can speculate a bit, it seems like the Northern Ireland, in Northern Ireland, the like political or social, like it's almost more codified, like because of like power sharing agreements and because of like this kind of like organization. Like if you imagine like why like let's say a reactionary like white like working class, maybe not even working class, white, aggrieved, maybe downwardly mobile group, and let's say, I don't know, Germany or the United States, like it's kind of like harder to get a grasp of the dynamics because there are people who, you know, have no way up, you know, who decide to vote for, I don't know, whatever party is representing this at the moment, Trump GOP or AFD or whatever. But like at the same time, there's like just like a absurd web of like money and people like being like, yeah, I'm a landlord of some like small East German town. I own like hundreds of apartments here, but like this movement represents me. And that's not really, it just seems like in Northern Ireland, in my impression, that kind of like hierarchy is more codified because there's like the young like people in the street, and there's like unionist political parties, and then there's unionist paramilitary groups, and like everyone kind of has like a defined role or something. That's, I don't know if that's useful at all, but that's a kind of impression I get, that you can almost like differentiate more between like, oh, you're a teenager out on the street versus you're like a member of this paramilitary group versus you're a politician, or et cetera. I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about like, there's something that, I mean, I think you could say the same for like racism in the United States. Of we've mapped something else onto class society. Almost, we've found another signifier for what was there and what we didn't have the vocab for.
I don't know if I said that, but I'll take it. Well put.
Because that's definitely what was the case of like Troubles and pre-Troubles Northern Ireland. Was Catholic was effectively your shorthand way of saying like unwashed masses, lumpen proletariat of Northern Ireland. These are the people who we kind of need as a labor force, but also at the same time don't really have a straight up role for within society. It was like, I'm not sure if this is 100% true, but like, as far as I understand, builders in Northern Ireland were predominantly Catholic. Like, it was just like, they were the people out there like building the streets or buildings and blah, blah, blah. That was the work we got them. But like, shop owners were largely Protestant, and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it seems it's like, if you're like an aggrieved, if you're like an aggrieved political citizen, let's say, it just seems like they're more clearly defined roles. Like, oh, I will be, I'll join a paramilitary group, like versus like, I'm kind of in this party, maybe, or even like, I don't know, get violent or something. But like, it's much more it's less codified or something, if that makes sense. Like, it just seems like there are these roles that are defined in Northern Ireland from these different groups. But
I think the general thing, and we might allude to this later when we talk about alliance, but maybe what you're getting at is the circumstances of Northern Ireland make fence sitting very unpopular thing to do.
mm-hmm.
You basically will have to take a position on something, or you will be in a situation where you are forced to. The post-Good Friday Agreement that kind of led to a whole generation of very apathetic Northern Irish people was kind of like the generation that came before them, their parents and stuff viewed that as like the privilege of being a young person in modern Northern Ireland. You don't have to take positions on these things. You can be apolitical. You can like live an unthinking, and not like unthinking critically, but you know.
I guess what I'm trying to say, I think I got it this time.
Yeah.
Like, obviously there's a crisis of electoral politics and a lack of faith, increasing lack of faith in, or loss of faith, I guess I should say, in, you know, electoral parties on national level, on state level, whatever. And the alternative to that, in a lot of, let's just take Germany, is it's not really clear. Like, people assume maybe, and some people do become like, oh, that means I'm going to be like a right-wing paramilitary or neo-Nazi. Then some people are like, oh, I'm going to get really into, you know, stones, and I'm just going to be kind of esoteric, you know? And because there's not really like clearly defined alternative, like that's like a kind of like false political organization, and then this is like the real coherent group. Like, everyone's kind of grasping at straws. And I think looking at the situation in Northern Ireland, at first glance, there's no faith in the, or there's a loss of faith in the established political parties, and we have this alternative here, paramilitary groups. But then, like, at the same time, that's not really a good answer, or like that's like not being that doesn't solve the problem, because it is just like another band-aid over class society, right? But like it has some kind of veneer, whether it's like, I don't know, memeing the IRA or something. Like, it has a certain veneer of like, oh, well, you know, they're getting closer to the root of what's really going on in this crazy world we live in. You know, like, political power involves, you know, organizing in this way. But I don't know. It seems like, although it's more socially or legally codified, it's still not really an empowering politic.
No, God. Sectarian. Anything sectarian in Ireland. Like, it's worth pointing out that I think it's worth pointing out that basically everyone good in Northern Ireland, whether historically or present, have been like aggressively anti-sectarian, as what they kind of view as a distraction. You mostly get this more on the Republican side, because I think the Republicans view this as this was a method of control. Like, this sectarianism was instilled by the UK as a method of control over historically all of Ireland, but now within the like statelet of Northern Ireland. That's the kind of rhetoric of people like, oh my God, am I going to get his name wrong? Well, I can say the person I know the name of, certainly. Bernadette Devlin, who was like an Irish socialist Republican, was very much like sectarianism was like a dead end. I think, was his name Eamon McMahon? He recently retired from politics, but he was God, what am I thinking of? Eamon McCann, that's it. Yeah, Eamon McCann, who was a people before profit politician before he retired in the Derry local council, but also one of the people involved originally in the civil rights strike that resulted in the Troubles, basically when that civil rights protest was like massively beaten down by the local police. That was like considered the watershed moment of Troubles have now begun.
Mm-hmm.
But also he was like firmly anti-sectarian as well. He was a housing rights activist that recognized the problem was predominantly on like the Catholic community of Derry that like faced housing shortages or like eviction problems, but also were like, I think the Protestant working class neighborhood in Derry was called the Falls, and he was like him and his like comrades were very big into like, we need to go over there and appeal to them as well. Mm-hmm. This like housing crisis affects all working class people of Northern Ireland.
Sure. But like, I guess my question is how would a political movement like that, like, yes, like housing, or I mean being working class, or these things that actually do get at the root of class society, is like, would like loyalist groups or working class people just be like, that's just republicanism, like, or that's how does that not, or would that come across as a kind of sectarianism because of the history?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's very hard to move a lot of people in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, in Ireland in general, away from these lines of thinking, but it does happen. There's a great Irish history website called Tanistry, and the guy who writes that is a very interesting character as well, because he's in around our age. He's a history student in Queen's University in Belfast, if I'm not mistaken. And he was being interviewed by the radio and stuff recently because he is what you would call like ethnically or culturally unionist, who through his understanding of history has become like a Republican and has basically converted his family to Republicanism, even though they are Protestant.
Yeah, we use the calipers. He does have the unionist skull shape.
He is fit for many jobs, such as running a business or becoming a police officer. Definitely not suited for the job of road laborer. Like this is the problem of like when talking with the Troubles is like I can't remember. It's like socio-ethnic or like ethno-political is like the term they use to describe these distinctions, because there's a huge overlap. Because like I said, like it's hard to describe him in particular, and he's not the only one of being like he comes from this Protestant background. His ancestry is Scottish or English planters, but he is a Republican, which Republican is often a synonym for Catholic and Irish Indigenous. But yeah.
Well, I think sadly we're not going to figure out the way forward in this hour of the podcast. But can you explain this, like, I don't know, like the historical background for like unionism since the late 90s? Like you called it like a paranoid, possibly dying unionism. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is kind of where I think this is coming from, because you mentioned the like Bobby Story funeral as being like ostensibly or nominally the reason why these riots are occurring. Any good, crude materialist, vulgar materialist should look at that and go, bullshit, fuck off. Because that, like, I don't even think, like, the people who are rioting, I don't think believe that, to be perfectly honest. I don't think anyone who's rioting up or any kind of source of media that's riling up these teenagers, I really don't believe they're just getting fucking pissed about like people attending a funeral. That's very hard to believe. They'll claim that for a justification reasons or whatever, but like, no, fuck off. So the Northern Irish Protocol, as a part of the Brexit thing, is really the reason why these riots are happening, but also at the same time it is a straw that broke the camel's back, I think, because since the Good Friday Agreement, since the these various concessions for both communities that resulted in a more democratic and equal Northern Ireland, B, a fluid understanding of Northern Irish citizenship. People can take one or both passports when they're born, British and Irish, which also meant like a more democratic Ireland and UK, because that means that all Irish people can vote in the UK and vice versa, if they live there, because there's no distinguishing between someone born in the Republic and someone born in the North. You also have like quotas for government, power sharing agreements, quotas for police, institutions, blah blah blah, and much like quotas for people of color and women into police stations in the United States. We realize this doesn't solve any kind of institutional problems, but that I digress. So Good Friday Agreement does a lot of things, but it's worth pointing out that logically, geographically, it always made more sense that Northern Ireland and Ireland worked as one kind of cohesive economic unit. Since the Good Friday Agreement, the most populated corridor on the island is the corridor between Belfast and Dublin, stretching across the northeast coast of Ireland, the island. Because, of course, why wouldn't it be? So these kind of things start to arise, and now we see a kind of, maybe you could call it like a doomerism from a unionist perspective, because they basically feel like their ideology is at a dead end, or they don't see a future for it without massive intervention. And that was why the DUP voted for Brexit, or why they advocated for people to vote for Brexit. And again, you can see that ideology dying because Northern Ireland as a whole voted to remain, despite DUP and the Unionists being like, you should vote for Brexit. And their reason for voting for Brexit was, this will distance us from Ireland, which is an EU member. That was they had no other, maybe they'd parrot some of the lines that Nigel Farage was saying, but they really had no other reason for doing it. So that's one great example. You have these other existential threats to the UK as a whole. You can go to smaller ones, this kind of weird crisis that's happening in the royal family now, where Meghan Markle and Harry kind of prove to the world that you can just leave the royal family and it's fine. You still get to be rich. You still get to be a celebrity. You have, Prince Philip dying, and you have all those polls being as soon as Queen Elizabeth dies, Australia is gone, Canada's gone, New Zealand is gone.
It would be funny if in the histories they have to write, this decrepit old man dying was, really the catalyst for, the unraveling of this. How old is the British monarchy? Thousands years old.
But that's that is just a very funny kind of the Adam Curtis of 2100. And then a very strange thing was happening in Britain. A Greek man died, and that caused.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's kind of less material, but the most royal family loving people are these people. These are the people who are, I'm going to be every stereotype of a British person who fell through the tourist office until I fucking die. And then we have other issues, other threats to the Union, existential threats to the Union, rising popularity of Scottish independence, a decent idea. Rising popularity of Welsh independence, an insane idea. What the fuck are you doing? Do you want another Estonia? That's how you get another Estonia. It's just we invented Welsh Skype, and now we pay companies to be here. You also have this is less relevant, but you have the Northern Independence Party, which is advocating for an independent north of England, which I think mostly structurally exists to pressure Labour from the left in threat of stealing their seats. But we'll see how that pans out. They're very new, but they are avowed Marxists and socialists. So yeah. I think before we go into the party politics, because I think there's a lot to say about that, I will go into some other kind of like liberal trends,
sure,
that are coming from the other direction that are threatening unionism. Because I think, as I said earlier, unionism is, I think I might have said this off mic, so forget that. But like, unionism is very like, unionism, especially immediately after Good Friday Agreement, was very like comfortable, was very middle class, was in America, in the UK, these would be your like Warren Democrats. These would be your Lib Dem voters. These would be like your bog standard like SDP voter, maybe. Like that's the kind of like role these people would like take politically, maybe like the left wing of the Tory party, I don't know.
Okay.
Or the left wing of the CDU. And these are the kind of people who did cling to these arguments that are now no longer true about the relationship between Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is one, at one point Northern Ireland was the more prosperous part of the island. Northern Ireland was the manufacturing hub of the island, which is also for the materialist reasons why all the Protestants were allowed like live there and set up shop, and why they got manufacturing investment in the first place is because they were London's favorite boys, basically. And that was also the part that had to come with the UK when Ireland was getting independence. But like now post Thatcher in the UK, and now post Celtic Tiger in the Republic of Ireland, where despite all of Ireland's neoliberalism, we have successfully, I think more successfully than Northern Ireland, transitioned into a service-based economy. So we are on all like measurable figures, and now which we want to scrutinize them, we are richer than Northern Ireland now. But there's a lot of critiques of GDP, I know.
Would they use the like language of progressive? Like what is the exact language that Northern Ireland said? Like more tolerant, or more like to describe the fact that they are like, I don't know, the better Ireland.
Yeah. So going on to like the progressiveness stuff, or quote unquote, did they use the word progressive? I don't know. Initially, when partition basically happened, and when the idea of Ireland becoming independent was happening, there was a line that was quite popular, which was called, that was like anti-Irish independence. That was home rule equals Rome rule. Is basically was the slogan. So it's, I think eventually at some point, maybe during the Troubles, during the 70s, it became like, we're more progressive, we're more free. Tolerant is not the word I don't think they would use, because they certainly weren't that.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, but like, there's a lot of like grim stories of being like a South Asian person living in Northern Ireland, I'm sure. But I think progressive switch, because initially it was just anti-Catholicism as like a kind of backwards people, and unfortunately they were correct for a good portion of Ireland's history. We were if you want, you can listen to our fun bonus episode about this, but we were effectively a Catholic theocracy for a great many decades, and we still haven't come to terms with a lot of the like horrible shit that we did in the name of the Catholic Church within our own borders, blah blah blah. So they were unfortunately correct about that. Like I said in the bonus episode, when I was born, contraception in Ireland was illegal, and people did cross the border from the Republic to Northern Ireland to buy contraception. Some people just took the ferry over to England because it was less like, you know, guns. If you did that, guns involved, it being waved in your face. But yeah, that was the thing. And now the reverse is true. Like when Ireland, when you were allowed to get a same-sex marriage in Ireland, when gay marriage was legalized in Ireland, it came into effect. A bunch of people traveled from the north down to get married because it's still illegal there. Abortion is still illegal in Northern Ireland as well, even though it's legal in the rest of the country. And these were all the concessions that kind of like London and Westminster made to keep control over that part of the country. Like you can have your weird kind of regressive in comparison to the rest of Britain society if you keep control there. The last kind of longer trend is a general one of like England or the UK or Britain, maybe to be fair, kind of going to shit in a very particular way. So there's a lot of great podcasts out there who will talk about this, people who are more focused on, you know, UK, who are based there and stuff like that. But like We have the like Stop the Bill protests, and that bill is going to like make protesting basically illegal. You have like the Tory government institutionally clamping down on like travelers, like a whole ethnicity basically deemed illegal to live the way they want to live. What else? You have like the whole situation in Liverpool where the most notoriously anti-Tory city in the country has basically had their local government like seized and taken control of, and like a Tory bureaucrat has been like put in charge of it, has been like appointed, with like zero Democrat say in that, and then like all the while having an opposition in the Labour Party under Keir Starmer's Labour that is not providing any opposition at all. Oh god! And then you had that fucking bill you had that bill that was like, yeah, all crimes committed by undercover cops are legal. And
I didn't hear about that one. I just read it in the notes, which is like, how do you bring that up? It's like, yeah, don't ask why we're passing this now. Just been on a big old pile of papers. Just got to it now.
No, it was a court case, and I think it was actually more directly related to Northern Ireland as well.
Oh.
Of like, this woman was raped by an undercover cop, and he's like allowed to get away with it.
Yeah. Crazy.
Which is not fun. And like, while this is a problem for the UK as a whole, I think the thing to couple with this in particular is that Northern Ireland is so peripheral to the UK that the propaganda machine that kind of keeps the English in line and is kind of like convincing them that this is good, are like, these problems aren't real problems, it's just a bunch of like woke SJWs complaining, blah blah blah. Like, that machine doesn't exist in Ireland. Or Northern Ireland anyway. Basically, Northern Ireland is like, well, you have half the population that's probably watching more Irish media than British media. Northern Ireland doesn't have a presence of like any of the established like British parties. The Tory party in Northern Ireland, the Labour Party, the Lib Dem, they're all fucking jokes up there. Like, there's no institutions to like relay the message that what's happening in the UK is, you know, good at the moment. And that's like what is probably like, all this stuff is like most of that stuff is very ideological, very kind of like liberal leaning, especially about the like prosperity and progressiveness stuff. But that does appeal to the soft unionist, the kind of unionists who are not the kind of people who went out in marching season, are not people who wanted to ever associate with the paramilitaries. They just genuinely were like Protestant from the unionist tradition, and like their main argument probably was, the reason why they were like unionists was, oh, we're richer. Oh, it's like better to have a condom. Like, yeah. And now those like, all that's kind of like fallen apart. So yeah, it might win over some kind of like salt of the earth, kind of like Protestant working class, like the people who were left behind when manufacturing died, because they probably remember the days of like a decent Labour Party, and they were inspired maybe by a Corbyn Labour that was maybe a bit more reminiscent of that like strong Labour, union associated Labour, and like how that's kind of been destroyed. Because I think that was always more successful up there, like, or that version of Labour was more successful in Northern Ireland than like Blairite Labour, certainly.
I want to talk a bit about this alliance. You mentioned them, right? I was looking.
I mentioned them briefly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, just can you go into this party a bit more? Just because I love the idea of it, like the liberal. Because I think a lot of people, you know, Americans for sure, and others are like, on Northern Ireland, where all the crazy paramilitaries are, and I just love the idea of the alliance being like, if woke is not the right word, then like the above it all, like smug liberal version, like Northern Ireland edition.
Yeah. So Alliance is like a very you're right. It's a very interesting like character in Northern Irish history. They, I think, like in any other circumstance, if Northern Ireland was not a country that had a history of sectarian violence, of like this weird apartheid state that existed for 50 years, this would be a very successful party. This would be like a normal like US Democrats, British Lib Dems, maybe like a more chill version of the FDP kind of party that appeals to like small business owners and like professional managerial class, blah blah blah. They kind of have this historiography of the Troubles that is very problematic, but like is unfortunately like the dominant message, especially of like media and creative types, both in Northern Ireland and Ireland, of like sectarianism is silly. Wasn't that silly? Both sides were silly, but the Republicans were the most silly.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, just to be clear. It's very like the Animal Farm line of like some animals are more equal than others. Mm-hmm. Some wings of the sectarian conflict are more silly than others, basically. So naturally, like because of this, trying to be above it all, they when during the Troubles, they were very much a party of the status quo, which was basically a party that sided with the Protestant and Unionist population because they had the status quo that was like working for them. And I think I mentioned to you earlier that during the Troubles, they had like the very patronizing campaign slogan of like a poster that was just, you know, their colors, which is yellow and black, Alliance, you know, it's the right choice. Like just like
it sounds like a candy bar or something.
Yeah, or just like okay, you had your fun voting for Sinn Féin, but now stop it. Stop it.
Come on. Eat your dinner. Stop throwing your food around.
Yeah, eat your fucking vegetables. And some Northern Irish comrades I've heard describe like the conventional media narrative of like sectarianism has basically coincided with, despite their historical unpopularity, has coincided with their message of like what my Northern Irish friends refer to as alliance core. Of like, I think the most famous example is the Zombie by the Cardigans is a great alliance core song.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
putting it together now.
Yeah, so the idea of like, oh, you know, this Republican youth is like, the people of 1916 are still fighting in your head, zombie, and like complete ignoring and rewriting of the history of what Northern Ireland was like from like 1923 till 1970, and like no, there was no other reason why like an entire community of people took up arms. It was just because they wanted to cosplay as like people from 1916 Easter Rising, and I was like, you sure that's what was happening? Again, this kind of like
that is a powerful talk about global things, like liberals thinking anyone with like radical politics is cosplaying, because there's no other reason why you would do that. It has to be personal neuroses.
Yeah. Or just like the kind of like anti-elite populism. It's like, why would they hate the elite? They must be racist. There's no reason to hate the elite.
Maybe it's because they haven't read enough books.
Yes. They didn't get high enough grades at school.
Yeah. Or nowadays it would be you didn't watch this, I don't know, the right YouTube video explaining what's going
on. But like our understanding of alliance also leads us into... because those wider, longer trends that I talked about of the progressiveness, of the prosperity, that definitely is the kind of thing that would sway alliance types to becoming Republicans, basically. That joining a modern capitalist Ireland is maybe better money for me as a member of the professional managerial class, and it'd be nice if like my gay friends could have got married in Belfast rather than Dublin, blah, blah, blah. Like, all valid reasons, I think, as far as the making money. Well, wait until they figure out what the economic hellhole Ireland actually is. But still,
we keep joining capitalist countries, and it turns out that they're prone to crises and have like no stable future. How does this keep happening? We keep stepping on these rakes.
Damn it. Well, let's try again. Iceland? All right.
Yeah, staying in the UK is the meme where staying in the UK is stepping on the rake, and joining Ireland is doing the kickflip and then stepping on the rake.
Yeah. But like, I guess the socially progressive stuff is like, I think, genuine. I'm going to be like sympathetic to that point of view.
One thing I'll circle back to though, just because you mentioned like, it's like it seems absurd that like that progressivism like can mix with an apartheid state, but like that kind of is progressivism in a funny way. Like that's progressivism sans like socialism is like, it's actually like explicitly been, I mean, it was developed in the US in the late 1800s precisely because like the radicalism of the like Civil War and Reconstruction period is like was crushed and faded away and given up upon, and you know, from a bunch of different angles. And then they're like, well, okay, we're progressives now. We just want to like fix the system and make it better. And obviously that kind of like liberal progressivism works in Israel. My favorite, the legal opposition to the in apartheid South Africa was called the Progressive Party. Like they were the like, you know, the Washington Generals to the Harlem Globetrotters, like the people there being like, oh, you know, it should be better than this. And so it's what at first seems like a glaring anachronism is actually like, no, that's about right. That's if you have like, you know, a kind of apartheid state, which is, you know, I like just from like a world historical scope is like one of the best antidotes to like class organizing that has existed, you know, just like throw everyone in a new, settle a new place. Everyone forgets about all those old, you know, relations of class, and, you know, fight about this new stuff. And what comes out of that is progressivism, actually.
I guess to like, you can even take examples that don't rely on like an apartheid existence. You can get like a great example would be just, I think we were talking about it a couple of episodes ago with like Denmark and their like integration classes of just like the native white Danish population kind of feigns this progressiveness by like trapping a Muslim refugee in a room, showing them a picture of a Danish woman, and then yelling "respect her" at her for like, and just like, yeah, look, we're more feminist than these unwashed Muslim masses, and it's just like that. You could maybe pick one random Dane and one random Syrian refugee, and that might be true, and it doesn't really justify like the terrible, weird immigration programs you're implementing.
Denmark actually does it like Father Ted when he's trying to prove he's not racist, and it's just a picture of a Danish woman and then respect her for a split second on screen.
God, yeah, those integration classes are just fucking weird. Very patronizing nonsense. But an understanding of alliance is also good because that pivots into the other kind of crisis of unionism at the moment, which is the kind of electoral, institutional crisis of unionism. I guess one that I forgot to put in my mention on the list, but I did mention it earlier, is just like the parliamentary unionist machine did try to get like all the unionists to vote for Brexit, and that didn't work. Like a good portion of the unionist population was like, no, that's fucking stupid. So like, yeah, that's like maybe in the terms of like a signal and terminal crisis, that's maybe your signal crisis of like, oh, you don't have like control of your supposed majority base anymore.
Yeah. It's like the emperor has no clothes, kind of like, you know, if I didn't tell them to do anything, you can keep up the charade. But then once it's forced, you know, a decision forces your hand, then what's this here?
As far as I understand, the majority of like the unionist community did overwhelmingly vote for Brexit, but like they are still the majority in Northern Ireland, and because majority of Northern Ireland didn't vote for Brexit, then whoopsie daisy. But we can get into a brief history electorally, because the unionists in Northern Ireland politically are willing to drop parties like a fucking sack of bricks. like the UUP, the Ulster Unionist Party, is gone now, like effectively destroyed. They, I think, were like weirdly kind of social democratic as well. So there's your like progressive apartheid state nonsense. If you want to fixate on that, but like they were kind of like destroyed. And I think if you asked anyone in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, oh, like, can you envision a Northern Ireland without the UUP? They probably would have said no. They're here forever, baby. And to take their place was the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, which was a bit more like saying the quiet part loud of unionism. But polling for them has not been going great. There is like a 6 point. Recently there was like a 6 point lead for Sinn Féin. They're 1 point away in the polls from Alliance, just nipping at their heels. A party that's kind of like historically not been very good, but are like not done well, but do meet the demographics of people who would vote DUP. Like they would appeal to that kind of like comfortable, bougie, middle class unionist, because they are also a party of kind of like status quo. And then you also have from the right, you have TUV as being like the more, say, the quiet, power, loud unionist party of aggressive right wing, and probably from the perspective of the paramilitaries, a little less quote unquote cocked. That's all stuff that's coming out in the polls, but also there was a leaked minutes from a DUP party member meeting of South Antrim. Or was it South Antrim or South Armagh? Can't quite remember. But like, where they were just like, these are all concerns we have. We're kind of like fucked in the polls, and we don't really have a way out of this. So, yeah, that's kind of another problem as well, where the DUP could be replaced by what has always been like a soft unionist party, despite like Alliance saying they were never like they were non-sectarian. But by being soft unionist and having some people from like Catholic and Republican backgrounds in their like senior party membership and amongst their base, blah blah blah, I think they do kind of like, they are just not ideologically committed to unionism as like a cultural practice. Like, they are very willing to distance themselves from the paramilitaries. They do not give a fuck about marching season, that kind of thing. And then you could theoretically persuade them to republicanism with this like, with these arguments of prosperity and progressiveness. So meet the demographic.
Then where does that leave? Because we've seen some quotes that say like this is like the last gasp, or like going out fighting kind of thing, for like a violent or militant unionist movement. And does that mean, I don't know, what does that look like then? Is there going to be like a lot of violence in the coming days, and then some reorganization? I mean, it's always safe to bet that the crisis drags out longer than than you expect. But yeah, it does seem like everything's pointing away from that. Right? Yeah,
I mean, there's also the other one that like nationalists and Republicans have gleaned to for a very long time, of like the demographics question, of just like the majority that unionists have had in Northern Ireland has always been like very slim. I think it's always been like historically 55 to 45 kind of thing. And the whole demographics thing is just like, yeah, the Catholics fuck more. What did we expect from like a religion that like says don't use contraception? And there's this thing of just like, yeah, they're willing to like, they're willing to stay. I think that's also like a class politics thing as well, because like Catholics tend to lean in Northern Ireland to being more disenfranchised, and therefore have less opportunities to leave the country and just kind of like have to stay. Whereas I think the more like middle class, somewhat apolitical, quote unquote soft unionists are more likely to go to London, basically, for work and whatnot. In the long term, in the future, I can totally envision, like as I said earlier, the LCC still kind of has control of the paramilitaries and like are coordinating things and can kind of control the rioters. I can kind of see them gravitating towards TUV, traditional unionist voice is what that stands for, which that's a lot of words that are setting off horrifying alarms in my head.
But even not to like downplay the threat, but even the like voice is like, we can't really do much, but we can yell and a lot, and like, because it's like, what are you all fighting for when this is the like, like, no, like, you know what I mean? Like if there's like no matter how many, Molotov cocktails you throw, you're bringing manufacturing back, And like it seems like deep down there's a recognition that like, yeah, but that's our role here. We're just here to, say we're on your side, and that's what sectarianism does. Like, just to be like, well, at least we're gonna yell for you. Or right. even more like to be more precise than yell for you, yell for this identity which you are. We agree. Good.
It's really funny because I also like I'm on their Wikipedia page, and the second thing on the Wikipedia page is like the traditional unionist voice, TUV, Irish, Gútear in Tochach. And I'm just like, they're probably really pissed that the Irish translation of their name is on their Wikipedia page because they do not want that. Maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe they're trying to like bring in the cultural Catholics. I can like in the future kind of see they kind of closing ranks, a collapse of the DUP, because the DUP also has like internal problems of just like being backbiting weirdos and like being massively self-interested to the point of being like transparently against the interests of the people who vote for them, and like kind of riddled with scandals. So again, I'm not surprised that their base is like moving to Alliance and TUV. And then I can imagine TUV just becoming this like weird quasi-fash party that's like very much associated with the LLC, and maybe in a handful of years just being kind of like regarded in the same way like the NPD in Germany is regarded, of just like that problem over there that we don't really like to talk about. Yeah.
So anything else about the unionists? That's about all we want to say on the topic. We have a few like, what's responses from other groups. But about unionism in general, like, I mean, no matter what happens, it seems like that there will be some violence, right? Like this probably isn't going away.
Yeah, I think the like we kind of alluded to already, the real kind of like horror or slight horror that's happening here is that the loyalist paramilitaries are not really any kind of political control, because whatever you can say about the DUP is that like when they were in control, they would stop them for personal interest, and their personal interest would just be like doing public procurement scandals. Whereas now, I think the article kind of uses the reference, like the metaphor of like the dog off the leash kind of situation, the dangerous dog off the leash. That is kind of what has happened to the loyalist paramilitaries, and they're coordinating and controlling themselves or whatever. But like, this is a problem, and they have their own ideological commitments, and then they have the non-ideological commitments of like their weird like drugs like rings and like weapons dealing scandals and stuff, or like weapon dealing businesses that they kind of have. So the whole thing is going to become very, very weird and very like gross and horrible. But like, yeah, it's like a whole thing to watch out for. I think we kind of said that earlier, but I just want to reiterate that point that the political side of this is kind of like the parliamentary political side of this has kind of lost control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, as Rob said, we can briefly just talk about responses on the ground of like stuff that's happening. Naturally enough, when loyalists kind of get out there and get violent, especially young loyalists, Catholic youth and nationalist youth have a tendency to turn out at the interface areas that I mentioned earlier, the places where like two communities meet. This is kind of like a self-defense mechanism, show of strength, being like, we're going to be here. If you try to come in and start shit, we are going to be here to fight back. So yeah, that's what's happening. Many voices in Northern Ireland, unionist, Republican, apolitical, are kind of encouraging these people to stay inside and not to contribute to a supposed like cycle of violence. It's very difficult to know that's good advice or not. Because if rocks are thrown back and forth, then any incidents of innocents being hit by like Catholic rocks will be blown up by the media as they want to do. It's worth pointing out that like Republican community leaders are very like openly saying this. Like the kind of like Republican community or Republicans within Northern Ireland are very aware that like the media is not in our pocket. They are not in our corner. If we step out of line, things are going to get bad, which is, I think, very telling, and I'm a tendency to believe them. And that this is probably what the loyalist youth and LLC types want to happen. Escalate things so they can justify responses. But that being said, again, self-defense is important. Like, projectiles are being thrown over peace walls into communities. This is people trying to attack people's homes. This is not like the Troubles where people are going after like military targets or businesses and things like that. This is not to use an overused word, but this is like terror. This is going after, your nan's house or whatever. And these communities also don't trust the police to help or be on their side or help quickly enough, whatever. So yeah, I genuinely find that like I really don't know what my take is on that, to be honest, of like whether people should go out and try to show like a sense of defense to like the rioting loyalists. I genuinely don't know. Yeah, I trust people to make the best decision. I know some like communist organizations up there who are also going out to act as like an intermediary third party of just like standing in between two communities to not let things escalate. And I trust them to know that's the best tactic, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah. Sinn Féin are calling on unionist political leaders to be responsible, which I think we've kind of talked about beforehand of what that mightn't really work now anymore. The DUP are trying to use this, as I said earlier, as like a wedge to abolish the Northern Irish Protocol of just like we kind of alluded to earlier, that they've kind of lost control of the situation, but they are going to capitalize it, much in the same way that Boris will probably try to capitalize this in like use against Brussels. We'll see for sure how much that strategy is implemented in the next coming days. But like DUP have already kind of like made statements on local media and press and stuff being like, we warned you that this would happen if there was a border in between Northern Ireland and Britain. So yeah.
I have one question that's a little just before we get to the unions. Sorry, this is out of left field, but like I think a lot of people, outside observers, look at this like, well, the Britain or England or the government really cared about defending, maintaining this division in Ireland. That's why there were soldiers there and all that. And now they don't care anymore. Or like, yeah, like they'd like it, but they've given up on Ireland or something. Is that like, what explains that? Other than like, is it like I would assume like, not a Cold War mentality, but like you know what I mean? Like almost like a leftover of like, we are projecting this world power. We have to defend our overseas dominions, literally in this case. And now it's like a post, whatever today is, post neoliberal something. You know what I mean? Like what explains that from the London's point of view?
Of just like, why even bother keeping Northern Ireland, you mean?
Well, like, I guess is that like an accurate assessment? What people say, like they used to care a lot and now they don't care as much. And B, why, if that's the case?
So I'm not sure if anyone has really talked about this, but like the Troubles in Northern Ireland was kind of Cold War-ish. Like there was a lot of these accusations of
Makes sense.
the Soviets funding the IRA and things like that. But it's mainly because that wasn't true. Is why that conflict continued past the end of the Cold War. So that's like an interesting angle there.
No, that makes perfect sense, though. I mean, I kind of threw Cold War out there and took it back, but I do think that so many of these states operated from that Cold War logic. Like, that was certainly the case with so many. Like, the U.S. was always obsessed that, like, communist China was directly funding all these groups in the U.S., which, like, they weren't.
Well, it was like, what was the guy who wrote the Ciarán method who was like, the Cold War was not a war of the first world against the second world. It was a war of the first world against the third world, claiming the second world was already there, kind of thing. Like, if you wanted to kill a CIA agent, just send him on an operation to Albania. Like, these things didn't work. But it is interesting. All I can really state about that is that London is kind of like shook. Not about this in particular, but like, I'm not sure if you saw any of this, but like Boris Johnson's like infrastructure plan of like, we're going to build a bridge between Scotland and Northern Ireland, or we're going to build.
Oh, hell yes!
Yeah. So that's, well, I don't think it's necessarily directly related to Northern Ireland itself, although maybe it is, because like the DUP have also kind of been historically now propping up the Tories. There was a thing that happened in the that election where Corbyn did quite well. I want to say that was the 2017 election.
Yeah, I think so.
The Tories were forced to work with the DUP, and like everyone on the BBC was like, "The fuck is a DUP?" Is basically the response. So we're pointing out that like a lot of people within the UK, both politically and culturally, just do not care or know about Northern Ireland. Like you ask people, you give people a blank map of the island of Ireland. They've done this before, like Vox Pop type of things, and they ask them to like draw the borders of where Northern Ireland is, and they'll just like do the most insane shit. They don't know their own country. It's very funny, but there is like an insecurity about the union, I think, from London's perspective, and I'd say that's largely fueling this. Because like any engineer who looks at the fucking bridge between Northern Ireland and Scotland can tell you that is completely unfeasible. That ocean is like stupidly deep. Stupidly fucking deep. Yeah. It can't be done.
It is like the ocean. Like it's not like a bay or anything, which often is the case.
Yeah. Well, people compare it to the Channel. They're like, oh, we did the Channel. And then like everyone's just like, yeah, but the Channel isn't like, again, like this is like 4 times as deep as the English Channel. And it's also made of limestone, which is like apparently just like stupidly impossible to like construct within, especially when water is involved. It's limestone, stupidly weak rock. I'm not even kidding.
I always mix it up. Limestone is the one that water dissolves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the GPO, the General Post Office in Ireland, like a famous historic landmark in Dublin, is made of limestone, the facade. And if you ever see any aerial shots close up, that fucking building is melting. Like, you can't build things out of limestone. Like, not without, like, definitely not. Don't put a fucking train through it. Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyway. But I would say everything, like any insecurity from London about Northern Ireland is like projection over Scotland, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And as we discussed when we had the Rupture Radio lads on, the cultural connection between Northern Ireland and the UK, the rest of the UK, for the Unionists, is more Scotland than it is England. And there's
yeah, true.
Yeah, and there's real questions of what would happen to Northern Ireland if Scotland left. I think there's also like this domino effect fear from London that if like one goes, the rest are gone.
Yeah. I guess the other way to frame it is because I frame the question in a mostly ideological way. Like, why did they have a Cold War mentality and they don't anymore? But maybe the better way to frame it, and this tracks with a lot of what we know about, neoliberal state governance, is that like they care, but like, what is it going to turn into, like, like occupying Iraq, like, to keep Northern Ireland in the Union? Like, just states are kind of like wary of that direct occupation, or like, whereas that was just the norm in, like, the 70s and 80s. It's like, yep, just they fought a war with the Falkland Islands back then. It's like times have changed in just like the statecraft point of view. Like the buttons don't have, like, if you press the buttons, don't do the same things they used to do in the giant. I imagine it looks like like flying an airplane when you sit in 10 Downing Street.
No, I think it's more like one of those books you get for children that's like the dog goes woof. and now when you press it, it goes, the dog goes I have a kid, so that's where that joke's coming from. But I think you're right. There's also like this weird, it's very hard to kind of like occupy this state or maintain this state with the logic of like, with the logic of neoliberalism. Like this isn't going to look like when the US occupied West Germany. It's going to look like when the US occupied Iraq. It's going to be very weird, because there's also, like, coupled in with this is the logic of austerity. Like, one of the things a lot of people are talking about now with, like, the violent response of the people from, like, Shankill, the, like, left behind Protestant communities, is like investing in those areas. It's like, cool, that'd be great if you didn't have like a bunch of people in charge who are so ideologically opposed to investing in anything that isn't just like one of their mates they went to school with, is just like a problem that can't solve itself. So the only solution is probably going to be more cops. And that will be fun, because that seems to be the solution for the rest of the UK at the moment. For like, like that woman, like, oh, Jesus, the whole, like, we have talked about it on the show, but like the woman being kidnapped on the street by a cop, and the solution from the British government is plainclothes cops in nightclubs. And it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is that there's another aspect of like what states exert their military energy on is like, global supply chains. It's like, do you have oil, lithium even? Like, otherwise you're a surplus population to be policed and, used, kept as a piggy bank. A piggy bank of people. I don't know, maybe limestone will power like the Hyperloop or something, but until then, you don't have anything like
Musk
that.
tweets something about limestone suddenly, like Trident is used for the first time on like Lisburn or whatever. So I think the last thing I want to say about responses is some kind of like silver lining, and possibly like, I think, a path for the future, which is unions and labour organisations within Northern Ireland. One of the first responses after the petrol bomb was kind of like thrown at this bus was all the transport unions in Northern Ireland protest the Belfast government, like block the building and whatnot, being like, I think their demands initially was like better protection for our bus drivers and stuff like that. Like, how the fuck did you let this happen, kind of thing. Which is good. I mean, I would certainly feel better if I was that bus driver.
For sure.
But like, could go further. The unions are strictly anti-sectarian. They are populated by Catholic workers and Protestant workers, although, again, from one of the crises of unionism is there's more Catholic workers in these kind of organizations than there are Protestant workers. Just because of the demographics, again, I guess. But while being very anti-sectarian, they're also very anti-political. Mm-hmm. And their demands don't really go beyond anything that isn't their immediate interest. It would be nice, as the article kind of stated, if any of these unions got out there and was like, basically just called on their union membership and other union membership to say like, no, fuck off with your like sectarian nonsense. This is bullshit. Fuck off. Stop letting your 18-year-olds get like orders from some sort of weird sclerotic drug dealer from the falls. Like, I mean, stop it. Just stop it. We need more union muscle. Like, even just if this had happened, like going back to like if this had happened in the 50s of those like, you know, port authorities getting threats from like UDA types, like, yeah, if you do a customs check on this thing that's going to Scotland, I will fucking murder you. Some fucking souped up Italians would have come now being like, hey, you're causing problems here. My boy Johnny McConnell, he's a good union boy. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like, I guess this gets at what I see is interesting about the situation, where when you say the unions are anti-sectarian and anti-political, it treats it almost as if it's one and the same, you know? To get political would be to get sectarian. And so long as like sectarian fills the gap of like, this is politics, this is political organizing, that you know, like a real politic, a class politic or whatever, like a forward force can't really emerge, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's even something to say without even going into like the class stuff, like, and you're 100% right about that. There's even a reluctance to even let your politics be anti-sectarianism, because like even in a sectarian society, or like historically sectarian, however you want to describe Northern Ireland, anti-sectarianism purely without any other critique is still capable of being a politics. Like, you don't have to get into the whole cool based like socialist syndicalist stuff without being like, hey, cut out the sectarian nonsense. Like that that can still be a decent step forward.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know the best way to put this, but like I really feel that politics in a lot of cases is like almost like removing the barrier, like the first step that like kind of allows people to like get over like an impasse, which is why people support like nationalist movements in the global south, or like, I mean, to take a better or a clearer example, let's look at nationalist movements in like in the third world back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Like they were very broad based, but it's like, yeah, it's not necessarily about nationalism per se, but it's sort of like, this is the first step to opening something new, and that is also a politics. It doesn't give you all the answers, right? Sometimes there's hard work to be done after that. But like in the same way, I don't know, nationalist is a charged word in this context, but like anti-sectarian does something similar. Like it's almost like shedding the sclerotic politics of the past, you know? Like just like shaking the Etch-a-Sketch or starting over is already like such a freeing feeling that it's like, oh, maybe it is possible to like, you know, have agency in the world and direct, you know, make our lives better and this and that, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That was an hour and a half discussion of what's happening in Northern Ireland from the perspective of a Yank and a Free Stater.
Yeah, thank you for letting me pick your brain and ask you dumb questions, Ciarán. It was fun.
Thank you for letting me seem like an authority on this topic. I cannot stress enough how much my generation was like discouraged from ever like thinking about the North, talking about the North.
It'll turn you into it'll make you blow stuff up if you think about it. You have to be careful.
Exactly. It's like, careful, Ciarán got into the Fenianism again. Like, oh, damn it. Yeah, but it's I feel very uncomfortable. And if I said some wrong or completely out of base shit, DM me, but be nice about it. But yeah, see you on the bonus feed. Ciao, ciao.
Bye, everyone.